A 91-year-old Dutchman awarded a Holocaust honor for saving a Jewish child has returned it to Israel after 6 of his relatives were killed in an air attack in Gaza. In fact, in his letter addressing the Israeli ambassador, 91-year-old Henk Zanoli wrote, for example, "For me to hold on to the honor granted by the State of Israel will be both an insult to the memory of my courageous mother, as well as an insult to those in my family 4 generations on, who lost no less than 6 of their relatives in Gaza at the hands of the State of Israel." Now, members of the family who escaped the attack still can't believe the deadly strike happened.
Half an hour before our house was shelled, 2 cars from Gaza came to take us away. Coming to a new place, I went to buy some food, and when I came back, my uncle told me my father was dead. My younger brothers think our father went to heaven, and my sisters were told he went to Egypt for presents.
This house was shelled on July 20th by Israeli air forces without any warning. My 6 family members were killed as a result. My mother, 3 brothers, my brother's wife and a nephew. The 4-story house was completely destroyed. What's going on in Gaza at the moment is an aggression of occupation forces against the people who live under occupation and seek justice and stand for their independence. 80% of the victims are civilians, with children and women among them. No doubt what's going on is an aggression. Strikes on houses and schools without a warning, the shelling of playgrounds, bombardments on the first day of festivities. What other thing can you call it? The shelling of hospitals and emergency vehicles. What can you call it?
Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbeth.
We're staying up to date on exactly what's occurring. When a 91-year-old stands up for what's right, you've got to really question why the Conservatives are blindly supporting Israel.
Especially when they received a medal from Israel for helping survivors out during the Holocaust.
And right now, we're monitoring the way people are pushing back. They're waking up and saying genocide is wrong. A British MP stood up and stood her ground.
And resigned her post.
Check it out.
The decision to scale back the operation follows a chorus of global condemnation. Spain's outrage has just seen it become the 2nd country to ban arms sales to Tel Aviv, while Britain says it's reviewing its £8 billion weapons agreement with Israel. But Khalid Mahmoud, a British Labour MP, he told my colleague Kevin Owen that he severely doubts his country's condemnation will go any further than just words.
Unfortunately, they've dragged their feet for too long. They can't even condemn the disproportionality of the action that's taking place, which Ban Ki-moon has quite rightly said is a war crime. And the issues are so desperate about innocent people, men, women, and very, very young children.
Baroness Warsi from the UK Foreign Office resigned, didn't she, from the government, saying she couldn't support this anymore. Do you think we'll see more people doing that kind of thing or not?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think, until we start to come to terms with those and not listen to the rhetoric that the IDF and the Israeli government is putting forward and look at what's happening on the ground, we have to try and do that.
You're in Birmingham, Britain's 2nd largest city there. You wanted to fly the Palestinian flag over City Hall, but the council said no.
I will continue to fight for that because it's about recognising the devastation that's taking place against innocent people, civilians and children. This is what this is about. This is not about taking sides in the dispute that's going on about territory and who should be doing what. This is about an unjust strike and retaliation against people who are unable to defend themselves.
So you really have to respect that when, people stand up for what's right.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that often in government bodies.
No, and you know that person is definitely, being vilified by mainstream media, but honored by the vast majority of citizens out there.
Now, with this latest resumption of hostilities, Bibi Netanyahu has said they will continue until their mission has been accomplished. Of course, they're not really defining what that is.
If it's destroying infrastructure, they've done 40% of destruction, of course, of the water, electricity, all the vital services that are necessary. They're turning it into a ghetto.
Well, it was already a ghetto, but now they have a bunch of homeless people to contend with as well.
Check out the numbers.
Over the course of the last month, Israel has bombed over 4,600 sites across the Gaza Strip during Operation Protective Edge. At least 1,888 Palestinians have been killed, the vast majority of which are civilians, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. On the Israeli side, 3 civilians have been killed and 64 IDF soldiers at the time of this broadcast. Moreover, over 5,500 housing units have been utterly destroyed and nearly 31,000 partially damaged, according to the Minister of Public Works and Housing. Israel has also destroyed a whopping 161 mosques, according to the Middle East Monitor. 500,000 Palestinians out of the region's 1.8 million residents are now homeless, trapped, with nowhere to go. And disease is only continuing to spread in the 11 days since Gaza's only power plant supplying electricity was bombed. And despite the rhetoric of doing everything to prevent civilian casualties, during the last 24 hours, Human Rights Watch issued a report citing numerous instances where IDF soldiers have actually targeted and killed fleeing Palestinians after being ordered to leave to evade death by bombing. But just today, all parties finally agreed to a 3-day ceasefire, and IDF troops pulled out of Gaza to abide by the humanitarian pause. In a page right from the Bush administration, the IDF is declaring mission accomplished, claiming it has achieved its main objective by destroying 32 tunnels in Gaza. Although what happens during and after the next 72 hours remains uncertain, one thing is clear: the siege needs to be lifted immediately for people to rebuild and to heal. The wall has to come down, and ultimately sovereignty must be given to Palestinians. Because until basic humanity is granted, this cycle of hate and violence will never end.
Of course, social media leading the way there, showing us the destruction on a regular basis.
At least the people of Palestine have access to Twitter and Facebook and other social media outlets.
And it turns out that Twitter had a big difference to be made right in the IDF.
Yes, apparently Bibi Netanyahu tried to capitalize on the recent horrific decapitation of an American journalist by ISIS and tried to associate them with Hammas.
Can you say retraction?
Check it out.
The entire world has been shocked by the atrocities of ISIS.
The Israeli Prime Minister's office was forced to do an about-face Friday in its public relations campaign against Hamas after setting off a social media storm by tweeting the image of U.S. journalist James Foley taken from the video documenting his execution.
And people like this ultimately fail. They fail because the future is won by those who build and not destroy. And the world is shaped by people like Jim Foley and the overwhelming majority of humanity who are appalled by those who killed him.
In an effort to further a comparison made for weeks by government officials between the Islamic militant rulers of Gaza and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, the communications staff in the Prime Minister's office Thursday afternoon published a graphic on Twitter juxtaposing Mr. Foley with an image of a body being dragged through the streets of Gaza. Encouraging followers to share the tweet, the Prime Minister's office added the caption, "RT this, Hamas is ISIS, ISIS is Hamas."
So as we know, social media leading the way with social change because we're all talking to each other.
You know, terrorism is another man's freedom fighter.
Yes, and really take a look at the history, the untold history of what's happened over in Israel right now, the way they're illegally occupying land, and there's nothing the UN can do about it.
And once again, our good friend Edward Snowden is back in the news.
Yes.
And he has news about what's going on in Iraq as well as Israel. And apparently, allegedly, the leader of ISIS may or may not have been a trained agent of the Mossad. Check this out.
To human rights attorney, Mr. Edward Corrigan, thank you so much for being with us. Well, the situation dealing with the ISIL terrorists just continues to spiral out of control, and now we're seeing that more and more Westerners are actually also involved in this. Question, though, sir, do you think that they would have even gotten this far if it hadn't been for the situation in Syria and basically the propping up of these kind of groups by Western governments?
Well, I agree with that. I think that the whole ISIL and ISIS were generated by the West. The Americans, the British, the Israelis have all been supporting them with arms and money. They've also gotten money from some Western client states like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. But the original foundation is simply from British intelligence. According to documents supposedly released by Edward Snowden that al-Baghdadi, who's supposed to be the head of ISIL, he was trained by the Mossad for a year and may in fact be a Mossad agent, and that he is trying to, I guess, organize Islamic fundamentalists and radicals to destroy the secular national Arab state of Syria. According to the documents released by Robert Snowden, that this is sort of like a honey trap where they want to gather all of the Islamic radicals and militants in one place so they control them, use them for their own purposes, but also maybe in the end destroy them. So it's a very dangerous game. It's a crazy game. It's arrogance and hubris, and they think they can do it. But now they realize that there is a real threat of blowback and terrorism attacks, especially if they're, British or American citizens who are trained basically at the expense of the Americans and the British and the Israelis, and then they're going to also resort to terrorism in their home countries. So that is a real possibility.
Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Edward Corrigan.
So once again, social media is leading the way.
And our thanks to Edward Snowden for bringing these ideas to light.
Yes, Snowden is a hero. Of course, Obama is not really doing a good job in that case. And we are going to be updating you on some other stories. But we got to thank you for the likes and shares because people are getting informed about the real story.
Over 75,000 views means our story's getting out there.
And thank you for all of your efforts and your support. So, coming up, we're going to be talking about environment and innovation.
And we'll also be talking about, the spin and the war state.
So make sure you stay tuned. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbets.
This is Radio Free Canada. It's independent media
for an intelligent world.
This is another part of an F-16 rocket. It is made in Japan. It states this very clearly. It's Sony and made in Japan. And there is a camera right in front of this piece of a rocket. This is the piece where with this camera, they actually choose their target and kill their target. And then Israeli claims that civilians were killed without intentions of killing them. Well, what does this camera do in a head of a rocket if they were not killed intentionally? So this is a very heavy piece. And here is the control board of this piece. And before a week ago at Shifa Hospital, we've seen this board in a head of a child.
Captain Johnson, what's the reason for ordering the press out? What's the reason for ordering the press out, sir? I just asked you a question. I was just asking a question, sir.
Take him.
I'm moving. Hey! I just asked a question. I just asked a question. That's all. Absolutely.
We're going to let cars start coming through here. Keep moving. Out of the road. Sir, you need to be out of the road.
Oh my God, gun range. Gun pointed. My hands are up, bro. My hands are up.
Hands up. Gun raised and pointed. Raised and pointed at the civilian. Hands up. I will fucking kill you. Get back. Hands up. Get back.
You're gonna kill him.
He's trying to kill him.
Get back. What's your name, sir? Your name's Go Fuck Yourself? All right, go fuck yourself.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, officer, go fuck yourself.
Officer, go fuck yourself. He's trying to kill me.
I hope you guys are watching. He had to be told by another officer to point his gun at people right now for no reason.